Thank you, and welcome everybody to our seminar. Today I'm going to talk about two things. One is a few items about how to design a survey, and second, we're going to talk about how to analyze some of the data, specifically Likert scale data that comes from surveys, and we'll see what that is in just a minute. Surveys are pretty ubiquitous. Unless you've had your head in the sand, you've been bombarded with requests to fill out surveys in the last few years. Anybody who buys anything online is asked to rate the purchase experience, is asked to rate the delivery experience, is asked to rate the product itself. In the grocery store, they print survey links on the receipts. It's just crazy. So we get bombarded with telephone calls. So if surveys weren't a big deal to you 10 years ago, they are now. At least you know that they're happening. So I want you to understand a little bit more about what makes a good survey and what makes a bad survey. So that's what this is about. And if you want to learn a lot about what a large group is doing, like maybe all of your employees, what do they think about your company, for instance, or what do they think about your project, and you don't have the time or money to survey all of them, we can tell from a fairly small sample what the tendency is. So I don't know if you know this or not, but in something like a presidential election in the United States, right, with something like 300 million people who are eligible for vote, you can tell fairly closely who the front runners are or who's likely to win with only a few thousand surveys. So it's a very powerful tool. So you hear about designing some, and we'll see, and mostly I'm going to show you bad ideas, right? So hopefully you'll recognize some of these. If you're going to design a survey, you need to write down why you're doing this, what your purpose is, and who your audience is. So the way you would design it and the kind of questions you would put in there would vary by the audience and the purpose. So make sure that's clear. Always start with the important questions first. So the most important thing you need to know should be the first question on the survey. And all the demographic things that you want to perhaps capture, like what is their race, what is their age, what is their income bracket, and all that kind of stuff, put that at the very end of the survey. So if you've taken surveys yourself, you'll notice that the well-designed ones are all designed this way for a reason. It should not be any longer than it has to be, so you need to keep it very focused on a single purpose. People don't like to take long surveys, and they will start it and abandon it. I have abandoned many surveys, only to think that I was going to spend them in a survey, and I'm up to number 20, and the little bar is only halfway across the screen. I just hit the kill it button and get out of there. I don't have time for that. You should always, if the survey is going to result in an important decision, you should always pilot test it. So once you think you have a good survey, go give it to 100 people or so and look at what you get back and look at their comments and maybe put in some questions that are designed to get their comments about the survey itself, so you can fix problems before you send it out to 10,000 people. We typically do an analysis of it and publish the results to whoever is the sponsor of the survey. Now I'm going to hear some bad survey questions. The best way to learn what a good survey question is to look at a bad one and analyze why is it bad. So this is a list of them, and I'll just show you one at a time what they look like. So first of all, a biased question on a survey, you don't want to have a biased question if you want an honest survey. That's where the wording leads the respondent to choose a choice. So in a court of law, this would be called a leading question. So you can see the top example here about Southern colleges. So we start off by saying Southern colleges are a good value for the money. Do you plan to send your child to a Southern college? So this is going to probably be a yes-no answer. But we have already biased them by telling them something positive about Southern colleges. You shouldn't do that. So A much better question is simply the second part of that. Do you plan to send your child to a Southern college? If you want to know what they think about how the value or quality of the colleges, those should be independent questions. Anyway, this is the most common kind of question we get on political surveys. Political surveys, as a rule, are all biased and bad on purpose, unless it comes from an independent organization that's trying to really see what's going on. The ones that are designed by the political parties and by the candidates themselves are usually all wrong on purpose. So hopefully you can see that from this talk. So second kind of bad survey question is a loaded question. And a loaded question happens when I have two sides, essentially, of an issue, but I only present one of them. So here's an example. Do you think that our college should fund training for 3 extra Six Sigma Black Belt students? Well, you don't know what the alternative is, right? And so that's not a very good question. In the second one, we give them 2 things. And we would have perhaps 2 boxes for them to check. One is for the first part, and the other is the second part. So should we spend it on 3 black belt students or 30 green belt students? Which one do you think we should spend it on? So that's called a loaded question. A question. I've heard this term a lot, but I'll bet that a lot of you don't know what it means. Well, here you'll know what it means. So a double-barreled question is where I really ask 2 questions at the same time in the same sentence, and I'm asking for a single answer. So here's the bad example. Do you agree that exams are too difficult and, right, the key word here is and, don't cover the material? Well, that's really 2 questions. So it's what if I think that they're too difficult, but they do cover the material? You know, there may be no option for me to do that, to answer that way. So that should be split into 2 different questions. One about the difficulty, ask one about the coverage. So that's a double-barreled question, puts them in a bind. It used to be a very common survey question problem. It's not so much anymore, but it still happens, and I've seen them. And that is choices that overlap. And this can be kind of tricky. So look at the top example here. What is your age? And here are the 3 choices I've given them. And you might offhand think, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is what if they are exactly 20 years old or 50 years old? Those are indeterminate. If I'm 20, do I pick the first one or do I pick the second one? And the same thing for the 50. Do I pick the second one or the third one? So I can, with a slight difference in wording, I can make that non-overlapping. Under 20, 20 to 50, and over 50 fixes that problem. So this is an easy problem to fix. This is a problem that usually happens by mistake. Problem is, with a survey question, is we're giving them a choice of things to answer the question with, and I encounter this all the time, where the choice is not exhaustive. This is easy to make the choices exhaustive, and that's shown down here in the middle of the slide. Have an other category. If one of the things, if what I really want to answer isn't in their list, I can choose the other category, and along with that, I should have a box where I get to tell them what the other category is. Many of you probably know about LinkedIn. I'll bet a lot of you are members there. I am, and you may or may not know that Microsoft bought them recently, maybe a year ago, and there's a new feature on LinkedIn about consulting, job consulting. So I joined that feature, and one of the things I had to do is to answer 2 questions. One is, what do I do? Right?